So now let's switch to the other popular one. One question is, most people want to hear, how difficult is your program? Are you really struggling or cruise control? Okay, I'm gonna start with Taigen, always. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. So I think this has a lot to do with the fact that I was able to come in with a lot of credit already. But because I'm sort of like in the same boat as Tina, where I've been taking pretty relaxed schedules, I've been doing about 3 classes every quarter, and I'm on track to graduate. I'd say overall, it's pretty doable, but I would definitely not say it is easy at all. And I think most people would definitely agree. So coming from CCA, I think CCA prepared me very well, but I do think UCLA is definitely a tier above CCA, even CCA in terms of difficulty. You know, there are some CS classes that are basically free A's, but a lot of the upper divs are very notoriously difficult. Yeah, but I think overall it's pretty manageable. I'm still able to like relax and have free time for myself pretty much every quarter. So I think it's overall pretty doable, but definitely not very easy.
Okay, I see. How about Tina?
Personally, UCLA does really well in having a good work-life balance. So I love being involved in a lot of organizations on campus, and I definitely do have a lot of free time to explore other interests. So the classes are very manageable, but as Saigen said, they're not super easy. So as a high school student coming from a very competitive high school, I thought I would be very well prepared, but everyone at UCLA is the top of their high school. So you're competing against like everyone is really talented and works really hard. But I will say that the culture at UCLA I've found is really helpful. Everyone's very supportive. So if you need any help, students are more than happy to help you out. But overall, it's very manageable, I feel.
Juna.
Okay, yeah, I think a lot of this depends on the classes that you are taking, because there are so many people that are applying to get into the CS major at Berkeley. It's like it's a pretty common sentiment that some of the lower division courses are even harder than some of the upper division ones. So it's really based on courses. Like one of the lower division courses that you have to take in order to declare is pretty notoriously hard. And I guess it's like a way to weed out some people. But there are also like pretty relaxed upper division courses. So it's like basically how you balance your courses within your schedule, because there are both like easy, or not really easy, but like easier and a lot harder upper division courses too. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out which courses are commonly thought of as not as time consuming or difficult conceptually, and which courses are, and then putting them in your schedule so that you're not overwhelmed. Yeah, I think overall it's like not too difficult, really.
Okay, Mike, and so the question was the same thing, but it's more about the efforts at CCA. It's very competitive. #1 public school in California, like Lowell, right? Like a gun. Okay, compared to like it's more efforts that you have to spend at CCA, or around the same?
It's actually about balancing the efforts you put in at CCA versus putting it in at Berkeley, because there's a trade-off. If you take like every AP class at CCA, then you might get to skip like 5 or 6 classes at Berkeley, and then that really helps you like get your schedule relaxed enough so that you can graduate in time. So I think the schedule is manageable.
Okay, I got it. How about Stanford?
Yeah, and I think I forgot to mention this earlier, but just as far as AP credit goes, I took the 2 AP CS classes, but it doesn't really count as credit for Stanford, so it doesn't really make a difference. The only really relevance it has is that if you have some really basic programming experience before coming into the school, you can probably just comfortably skip the very first level of CS classes. And for me, since I took those classes, I could, but you don't even have to do that if you have sufficient experience. But yeah, as far as difficulty, like I mentioned, the earlier classes that you can kind of skip with basic programming, they're pretty easy in the sense of that Stanford is really like encouraging of everyone to take that CS class for that big CS community. But other than that, like the others have said, I'd say it's definitely manageable, but the content in classes are still pretty difficult, especially some of the upper div classes that are notoriously hard. And I think the most important thing I would say is that if you just find a good group of people to work with and take the classes together with, that will be the most helpful resource, and also just going to office hours and engaging with the class as much as you can. It's very supportive, so if you know how to reach out, then you'll probably be fine, but it definitely requires a lot of work. So
Amber and Caitlin, UCSD. So how difficult? You come from an international background. I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so I went to a local school in Taiwan, Taipei, and so we don't have anything like APs at all, and I didn't even have SAT prep in my school. I had to like go take the SAT outside of my school, and so when I went to UCSD, even though I did have like a very solid like math background, definitely it was a struggle for me in the beginning. I did have to spend a lot of time in office hours and with, you know, the professor's office hours or going to TA to office hours. But in terms of difficulty, I think honestly it comes down to several things. Number one, who is your professor? A lot of times if I find a class extremely difficult, it might be not because the professor is bad, but it's just that his or her teaching style doesn't match up to my preferred learning style. And in those cases, I will just have to go find a TA who I know I can rely on, or I know has a good way of explaining things to me and really like get help from them. And another factor in terms of how difficult something can be for me is how many other things am I also doing outside of academic work. I personally spent a lot of time outside of academics doing things like tutoring for other CS classes, and a lot of time in a student org at UCSD. I spent a lot of time in the Engineering Student Council. So a lot of it, I think, comes down to these two things, you know, what is your learning style? Is it compatible with the professor? And number two, what is your schedule like? How much time do you have, and can you put into learning this new thing that you've never learned before? And honestly, as long as you're willing, you know, this was kind of echoed in the previous answers, but as long as you're willing to really ask for help, there are resources. People are going to be willing to help you. And at the end of the day, if you're finding something really, really hard to understand, people will know, people will help you, and you're not alone. And so I think, yeah, it can be difficult, but you really just have to know what to do to unblock yourself when you feel stuck. And I think that's like the key to managing difficult situations and learning hard things.